Welcome to the Beyond Atheism podcast, with me, Nathan Alexander, and my co-host, Todd Tavares. This podcast moves beyond questions of God's existence to ask, what's next in a godless world? If you're enjoying the show so far, remember to like and subscribe, rate and review, and consider supporting us on Patreon. Beyond Atheism is produced and distributed by Atheist United Studios.
Today we are joined by Anya Overmann, the host of the upcoming limited series podcast, The Nomadic Humanist. Anya is the former president of the Young Humanist International and has been working and living nomadically for over 2 years. Her podcast covers the challenges of being part of the world community, the ethics of travel, and some of the considerations made when choosing a destination. The Nomadic Humanist is a production of AU Studios and drops on September 14th. Anya, welcome to Beyond Atheism.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Thanks, Anya, so much for coming on. So, Anya, you are in Guatemala right now, I understand.
Yeah.
What are you doing there?
Well, that's funny you should ask. I actually am here specifically right now because I broke my leg about 3.5 months ago, and I have a friend who lives here who made a really hard sell on me coming here to get medical treatment. So I ended up here, and this is not my first time in Guatemala. It's my second. I was actually here about a year ago. And yeah, it's a beautiful city. It's currently rainy season, so it rains about every single afternoon, but it's pretty warm and nice in the morning. It's a nice city. I enjoy it, and I've been getting taken care of really well while I've been here. I'm finally out of the boot, so I'm able to move around a little bit easier now, and I can speak highly of the medical care I've received here. So yeah, that's the short version of why I'm here.
Wow. Well, wait a minute, but that buries the lead. What happened to your leg? How'd that happen?
So back at the end of May of this year, I was in Scotland, in Edinburgh, and I was out dancing, which is not a common thing that I do anymore, but I was persuaded by peer pressure to go dancing. And I twisted my ankle, and I frequently do that, so I didn't think much of it. I just thought, oh man, I got one of my 3 or 4 annual sprains, so I better, chill out. But yeah, it turns out it was broken in 2 places, and I didn't quite process that until more than 24 hours had passed. So I was walking around on it, making it worse. So eventually I went to the hospital in Edinburgh. They x-rayed it, and they're like, yep, it's broken. And they put me in a boot. And yeah, that's how it happened.
Wow. So now, I mean, this gets into something pretty crazy about when you prepare for travel, when you're traveling abroad. I guess this is one of the travel challenges, is things like healthcare. Why then do you have to go from Edinburgh to Guatemala for treatment? I mean, this is
So
a choice you made.
it is a choice I made. So I feel like I need to provide some context here. So when I broke my leg, I went to a public hospital in Edinburgh and didn't pay for anything. Which, by the way, even though I'm a global traveler, not paying for healthcare still feels really weird to me. I get it feels wrong somehow. Like when I'm walking out of not walking, rolling out of the hospital without
Mm-hmm.
having paid a bill, it feels
Yeah.
like I'm like a criminal or something. So it's really
Right.
like the
Yeah.
US
Yes.
medical system is really deeply ingrained into me, and
Mm.
it's hard to unlearn that.
Yes.
After I got my care there, I mean, they put me on blood thinners as well, because they were really concerned about me flying, because I had a flight to Los Angeles booked. So they
You're
put me
very
on blood
serious in terms of
thinners.
traveling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was on blood thinners. I got to LA, and I actually stayed with Evan, or not with Evan. I stayed at Evan's apartment for about a week.
Talking about Evan
Evan
from Atheist
Evan
Evan
United,
Clark.
Clark, yes.
Yes, sorry, Evan Clark.
Former guest of the show, friend of the show.
friend of the
Yeah,
show.
Yes.
Yeah, so my partner and I were cat sitting for him and his partner while they were still in Scotland because they were actually there overlapping at the same time as us because there was a humanist conference there. So they needed some cat care. They were, short on some days. So we went and cared for their cats, and I chilled out in their apartment. And then we went and stayed with another atheist friend for about 6 weeks in Pasadena. So I spent that time in the US while I was there recovering, but not going to any doctors because I no longer have US health insurance. I have a travel insurance that covers me basically everywhere else, but the coverage in the US is super limited. So I was not keen on going to any doctors there. And so when my friend was like, "You have to come to Guatemala, I know all the doctors. We can take care of you." I was like, "All right." I mean, I have good friends there that want to take care of me. I have much more affordable access to healthcare there. Yeah, I think that's the right call. So that's basically how I ended up in Guatemala from Scotland after breaking
Right.
my leg. It's kind of a winding story, but yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So you are well. Your podcast is called the Nomadic Humanist. Maybe you can just tell us about what it means to be a nomadic humanist.
Yeah. So the way that I define it is, humanism is inclusive of these very communal values. And when you're a nomad, you don't have one fixed home or community. So living out these humanist values is very different when you're constantly moving around. So my podcast essentially explores what it's like to apply those values in a very different type of lifestyle where you're interacting with many communities rather than just a single one. So that's essentially it. In the first season, we cover, let's see, we cover intersectionality, which is a huge thing that I talk about all the time, and how that applies to travel and privilege in other countries. We talk about being part of a world community and how difficult that is when, so many people around the world are struggling, just to stay, healthy and survive and are in poverty. I talk about, let's see, I talk about what we consider when deciding where to go, which I wrote a blog piece about that, and that was one of the more popular pieces that I wrote. There are a lot of factors. And so my partner and I have been doing this for about 2 years now. And it sometimes gets tiring. I mean, there's decision fatigue because, we're constantly, measuring different criteria against one another to figure out, where do we go next and how long can we be there? There's a lot to
So
measure.
Anya,
So, yeah.
yeah, let's bring us back to the start then, because it sounds like you learned a lot of this by doing. You're learning it on the road. You're putting your worldview and your ethos into action. I'm assuming that the plan originally wasn't all dancing and cat sitting. How did it kick off? What was the intention? Where did you go? Did you have an end date? I have a lot of questions about
Um,
this.
yeah, no, those are all really good questions. So I started my own freelance business back in 2015 or 2016. And at that point I was already working remote. I mean, it was really natural for me. And when I read about digital nomadism for the first time, I was like, oh my God, that's me. That's me to a T. And as soon as I learned about it, I was like, all right, that's what I'm going to be working towards from now on. That's it. I figured it out. So, I was working for myself, and, being a startup and working for yourself is rough. It's not, it's not all that sustainable. It's not a
So,
reliable income.
right.
So
And your
for
boss is just the
years,
worst.
oh, she's terrible. She's terrible. So yeah, so I was working for several years, just trying to gain some stability and get my footing. And my intention was, okay, once I really figure this out and I get my stride, then I'm gonna snip my roots and I'm out of here. And at that time, I was in St. Louis. So yeah, so that was the plan. And then 2020 rolled around, the pandemic hit, and everybody was like, travel's over. And I was like, oh my God, this is, not boding well for
For
what I'm
anything.
working towards.
Yeah.
And then the US, well, St. Louis in particular, just got so bad with COVID. I mean, and not just COVID, but like the denial of it and just the culture of walking around not caring, it started to really get to me. And St. Louis wasn't my favorite place already. I mean, I had a lot of criticisms against it before that happened. So this was really kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for me. And around that time, I met my partner who was already a digital nomad and had just started. So it kind of made sense. And he really helped encourage me to start to move forward with the plans. And the reason that I decided to pull the trigger is because of how bad it was getting with COVID. And I was reading about other places that were faring better culturally with pandemic safety. So we started seeking out places that, one, were letting U.S. passport holders in, because at that time it was maybe a dozen countries that were letting in U.S. people, so it was pretty limited at the time. And then we were also balancing that against, COVID case counts and how long we could stay there. So we did a lot of research. We considered Mexico for a while. We considered Belize very briefly. Eventually, we settled on Croatia because at the time Croatia was open, and they had a national mask mandate, and their case count was really low at the time. So we left end of August 2020, and I sold everything in my apartment. I sold my car. I gave up the lease early, and yeah, we just kind of got out of Dodge. And yeah, it was actually the only time I've ever had a flight move up rather than back was this time, the time
Of
in my
course.
life where I needed
Yeah.
things to be a little bit more stable.
Yeah.
So we had this flight planned, and then we got a notification like during the week leading up to it, and they were like, "Hey, by the way, uh, we're going to take off 2 days earlier than you
Oh, wow.
expected." So
Yes.
I
Two
started
days.
panicking. two
Right.
days,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so I was
And
panicking because
that
I was
was
like, I still have to rid of all this stuff in my apartment.
right.
Like, I'm not
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, I got help, and
Mm.
we made it happen
Uh,
somehow, but it was
yeah.
stressful.
And that was going to Croatia. Or
Yeah, to
okay.
Croatia.
I see. So then how long did you stay there then? And what was it like with regard to COVID when you went?
So we arrived in Dubrovnik, which is in the south of the country, on the Adriatic, and it is, the filming location of like Game of Thrones and I think some Star Wars movies. So it's a very popular tourist destination. But at that time, it was just completely dead. So we got to see it at a very unique time when it wasn't packed, which was awesome. But yeah, the attitude towards COVID in the south of Croatia was very laid back
Okay.
and
Oh, yeah.
lackadaisical.
Oh no, right.
Yeah. And we kind of figured out after speaking to some locals and kind of getting a beat on the situation is that, there was a lot of distrust in the government because, Croatia's a very young country. They have a very recent history of authoritarianism. So it really made sense that they were, distrusting and skeptical. So we couldn't really fault them too much for that, cultural skepticism towards that. But we're like, hey, no, really, this this is global. Like, it's definitely outside of Croatia too. Like, I promise you, it's a
Yeah.
pandemic. Like, we
Yeah.
need to be
It's for
more
real.
careful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
so
this
yeah, that
is it.
wasn't ideal.
Yeah. But it's a pretty immediate culture clash, or like internally. So was there
Yeah.
like there must have been a lot of, I think assimilating is the right word for it, because it's assimilation is more of a give and take. But was there a lot of, for you, like a lot of unlearning sort of domestic American culture and a lot of learning the Croatian culture, or was it part of learning a global culture?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a degree of that for sure. And I always try to give pause before I, jump to a conclusion where, I'm like, oh, well, Croatians, they don't give a shit about the pandemic, like I want to give pause because I'm like, okay, well, what is that really what's happening here? Or am I just not seeing, a full situation? And frankly, when we traveled up farther north into the Istrian Peninsula, which is, closer to Slovakia and Italy, and then when we went into the capital city, Zagreb, they were a lot better about masking and they very clearly cared more. So it really was more of a regional difference. So that was for me like a really big relief because I was like, okay, it's not a nationwide thing. It's certain parts of the country are have more animosity than others. So yeah, it involves a little bit of adjustments and trying to reframe expectations. But I frankly I experience probably more of that in Latin America because I think in the U.S. we have such a high expectation of service and experience. So when we pay for something, it better damn well be good, right? In Latin America, that's not the expectation. You just need to adjust them because it's not the same. You're not working with the same systems. Some things move slower. Tracking on like Uber Eats is not that good, so it's just like little things like that where it's like it would be very easy for any US person to go like full Karen and be really upset about that, but it's just kind of one of those, you got to reframe and okay, not everything is, spectacular service and that's okay. It's, you're going to be all right. So it involves some reframing and taking some steps back sometimes.
Are there customs that you've picked up? So, all right, I'll tip my hand a little bit. Nathan and I met abroad. We did not meet in North America. And like I grew up wearing sneakers in the house all the time, wearing your shoes all the time. The only time you take them off is to go to bed. But now I never wear shoes in the house.
Really?
Like, yeah, it feels dirty to me. I just can't do it. Totally internalized a completely different cultural norm and moray. I also use a bidet, which for everybody listening, you have to do.
Oh, I so agree. I so agree.
Yeah, it's just horrible. But
I mean, the thing is with bidets, you wouldn't wash your hands with a paper towel, right? So
exactly.
Why would you?
Yes. Yes. Right? Why you wouldn't just rub paper against your hands? And say, I guess that's clean now. No.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm with you on the bidets, and I'm with you on the shoes too. Actually, that custom I picked up on my very first trip abroad when I was 18. My uncle, who lives in Hong Kong, he's lived there for like 25 years now. He gave a graduation present to me, which was flying me out to Hong Kong and having me live and work for him for, I think it was 3 months. And yeah, after that experience, I was like, I can't wear shoes in the house. That's blasphemous. Yeah. Right? And it was funny because my brother, he got the same gift. He's about 2 years younger than me. And after that, whenever we would be in our parents' house together, our shoes would be at the door as soon as we were in. Mm-hmm. And so it was like a weird, like the whole family adopted it after that because we just started doing it. Right. And it just became a thing that my whole family did. So yeah, it was kind of interesting.
So now, okay, here's the thing. Like, okay, that happened earlier. Which way do you think this goes? Did that experience inform your humanism? Or did humanism inform your globalism?
Humanism.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Humanism was the motivator because I actually grew up attending the Ethical Society of St. Louis, and for your listeners, for reference, that is a part of the American Ethical Union. And essentially, the way that I've grown up describing it is, it's like church without religion. It's very much you show up on Sunday. There's a congregation, there's music, there's a speaker, but it's not like a pastor or preacher that's standing up there, telling you how to live your life or reading Bible verses or anything like that. It's a variety of speakers each week Sometimes you'll get a college professor, sometimes you'll get, an author who wrote an autobiography on a really like harrowing experience. It's a really wide variety of speakers, and they're really trying to bring in all these different experiences. So that's how I grew up. And so I, grew up humanist. And my favorite core value from ethical culture is about being part of a world community, which depends on the cooperation of all people for peace and justice. So that really strongly motivated me. I was really, really sold on the idea of a global community. That just made sense to me. I was like, well, if we're all humans, and this is the point, is to, uphold the dignity and worth of every human being, then it would follow that everybody in the world is a fellow citizen of mine, right? A person that I, share some sort of bond with, and not in a spiritual way, but just we're the same damn species. Like, we have a lot in common. So yeah, so that's kind of how that developed. And I didn't used to be as global as I am now. I was really focused on the UK and Europe for a stretch there, but have since become pretty jaded about Europe, actually.
Wow, too much time in France? I think that's, or was it Dubrovnik that did it?
No, actually, it was from working with a lot of European humanists. I wanted to believe that Europe is the role model for the United States in terms of progressivism. That's what I wanted to believe, and frankly, that is kind of a lot of what we get in school, and especially university, and just as young people, I feel like there's a lot of you got to go to Europe and backpack and find yourself, there's a lot of that going around. So, and with how much more, like universal healthcare and universal education, and public transport and all of that sort of public programming is really kind of idyllic. And I would love to see the US follow suit. But after spending more time in Europe and kind of spending time speaking with people who share my values, I found that there's kind of this disconnectedness of Europe from the rest of the world, and they really kind of have this very similar, Eurocentrism. It's a very similar effect, and I found that there's like a pretentiousness and well, we made it this far, so why not just stop here type of attitude. And I
And
don't
this is
much
in
care
the
for that.
humanist community or in
it is
general?
it is in the humanist community, and those are the people that are supposed to be some of the most progressive people out there, right? So I don't know if you're familiar with James Croft. He's the current leader of the Ethical Society of St. Louis. He's originally from London. Some of the things that his observations are really interesting, right? Because he has this unique view into U.S. humanism and UK humanism. And one thing he noted to me that was super interesting is that the politics and the discourse in the UK and in Europe in general in humanism tends to follow the US, and it's about 10 to 12 years behind. So these conversations about race and gender identity, um, he observed that a lot of the UK organizations and European organizations don't really think that's not a conversation that needs to be had, or they don't really think that, they just think that the US is being dramatic. They think, oh, they're so sensitive and so into wokeism, and that's kind of the vibe. But what James told me that he believes is that, that those conversations are coming, those debates are coming, that discourse is coming. It's just a matter of some years, and they will likely be caught off guard by that, because I do not see them preparing for dealing with those conversations in a way that will put them out ahead. Not at current.
But that, I mean, I leads to another question though. Is there much contact in those sort of humanist communities? I'm not. You made it sound like you had a lot of connection to them, at least initially in Europe.
I do.
Did you travel in humanist circles while you were there?
Yes. Part of the reason for that is because I worked with Humanist International for about 7 years. So I was doing a lot of, going to conferences, networking with other humanists in Europe. And yeah, so in that time, I really was able to get a pretty good view into, the landscape of the different organizations and the people and the players involved. And
Have you
it's
been
an
able to
interesting
tap
thing.
into that on other continents as well, in like Latin
Oh yeah,
America, where you are now?
totally. Yeah. So there's humanists here in Guatemala, and the friend that I was talking about that hard sold me on coming here. She's a humanist. She's also part of Young Humanists International, and she's one of my best friends. She's super active here, although Humanistas Guatemala is not a super active humanist group right now. They, like many other humanist organizations in developing countries, and I'm putting that in quotes because I hate that term, but other countries like that are struggling with this. There's a lot of bureaucracy that goes into being able to establish these groups. Each country has their different rules, and they make it harder for non-religious people depending on what country you're in. And Guatemala is a very, very religious nation. Historically very Catholic, but as of late has actually the tides have turned, and evangelicals are absolutely dominant here. So it's difficult. It's really difficult for them. So it's a different kind of conversation around humanism and atheism in these countries, that are really heavily Catholic. Yeah, and I've connected with humanists in Colombia and one in Mexico. And when I've traveled, I've been to New Zealand and Australia for some conferences. I connected with some there. And I mean, the Philippines is one of the most active humanist organizations. They have very active humanist organizations there. And yeah, impressively so. I mean, they do the heck out of some charity.
Hmm.
It's really impressive.
Interesting. Yeah. So yeah, what do you think? What do you think is lacking, like in European or American humanist organizations?
Well, so there's a lot of holding on to these new atheist idols and ideals that I think are really kind of holding us back. I actually just published a piece on Only Sky yesterday, titled "I Don't Want to Be Your Friend Just Because You're an Atheist." And essentially, that article is about, you know, being an atheist just means you don't believe in God. That's it. It doesn't have anything to do with your values. It doesn't tell me if you, understand the complexity of gender identity and respect someone's pronouns. It doesn't tell me if you are committed to anti racism or are a feminist. And it doesn't tell me if you have any opinion towards unfettered capitalism. So there's a lot of assumptions, I think, in the atheist community that if you made it to the atheist identity, then you're a good person. And that's just not necessarily true. And so we hold on to that notion, and then we end up revering these prominent figures who really don't deserve to be revered. And when people, young people especially, see this, it's really discouraging. Because why would I join a humanist or atheist organization that praises someone like Richard Dawkins, who, has been pretty bigoted in the past and hasn't really apologized very well for it? So that's really discouraging to young people. And I think that these humanist organizations and atheist organizations aren't really thinking ahead in terms of, okay, who's going to pick up the torch when we're done? We need people in the pipeline to take over the movement generation by generation. And if you're not getting new people, if you're not getting young people, I mean, you're going to be hard pressed to survive the next 3 decades. So I think there's a lot of tokenism that goes on as well. So saying like, hey, look, we have a young person here. Look at them. They're active. That means we attract young people. And a lot of that time, and by the way, I've been that young person way more
Yeah.
times than I can count.
Yes,
I'm
yes, right.
frequently that person
Yes.
they point to, like, look, we got one.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and when that happens, it's like, I'm not here because I feel compelled as a young person. I'm here because I want to make it more attractive for young people. It's not that I feel a like really compelling sense of belonging. It's that I'd like more people to belong. So that's what I feel like my role is in the movement. And, I don't know how sustainable that is. There's only so long that you can tolerate not having a sense of belonging before you're like, why am I still here?
Yeah.
This is a drain.
Yeah.
So
No, that's true.
yeah, so that's what I think what both US and European orgs are really missing right now.
Hmm. And is this something where would this be addressed? We're not, I don't really know anything about the Humanist International structure, but is this something that it's the local organizations, or it's national organizations, or it's international in how
I
it
think
be addressed?
it's so pervasive that it's everywhere. I mean, it wouldn't be addressed by any single, level of engagement. It would have to be this very sweeping change. But I think a good place to start would be to stop platforming these really problematic atheists that really have it's very well documented, how problematic a lot of these prominent figures are, and they continue to make money and profit and have their words platform. So a good place to start would be finding people that are much better candidates for being the face of the movement and platforming them instead. And in the article I just wrote, I listed like 5 people that would be way better right off the top of my head. And Sikivu Hutchinson, Nadia Dutchin, Hemet Mehta.
Which
um,
who's your fave and why?
who's my
Pump some
fave and
tires.
why? Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
who's
that's
your
so
number one on
hard.
that?
Ah, I don't know. And it's really hard because each one brings something different to the table. And that's really what I'm trying to get at, is that we don't want a, unified one person embodies the whole thing. We want this like, kind of kitchen table collective of really, varying perspectives that come to the table and allow us to see from a a higher view. So that's what I really want, is just a more I guess a wider distributed influence of humanist and atheist figures, I guess, yeah, the spotlight has just been on the same people for like 20 years now, and
Yeah.
come on.
And is this something you learned from traveling to different ones, or is this something that's known sort of everywhere?
This
It
is
sounds
more
like
of
this
a
wasn't the issue in St. Louis.
no, 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 no. St. Louis, for me, that was more of a personal thing. That society is wonderful. I mean, they are some of the biggest supports that I have to this day. I mean, they're wonderful people. For me, it was just the city of St. Louis is just a bummer, and I just couldn't do it anymore.
But
It's
no,
it's
so
not for me.
here's a weird. Okay, oh, actually, so where this goes is kind of interesting to me, is that this is one perspective that you get from international travel. Like, humanism is not the same at home as it is abroad, but there's also other groups that you're coming into contact with, and they have totally different values as well, don't they? So I'm thinking, on like the one hand, you've got humanists. On another hand, you've got sort of the jet set, digital nomads, backpackers, and then I guess on a third hand, you have the locals. So how, like, can you compare and contrast across those? So you move from the humanists. What's it like being part of this group of digital nomads, and what are
Great
they like?
question.
Mm.
I am actually not super close with other digital nomads. There's a handful that I'm connected to, but overall, I don't really get along with them very well. And the
Uh-oh.
main reason for that is that there is a blindness to privilege within the digital nomad community that I find intolerable to be around.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is there are a
Tell us
lot of
more.
people. Absolutely happy to. Yeah. So a lot of digital nomads come from countries where the passports are incredible. So, a lot of US travelers, a lot of European travelers, a lot of Australians, just a lot of people from countries where the passport strength is awesome.
Mm.
It becomes a lot
To me, they
harder
can stay for a
to.
long time. They don't have any
Yes,
problems. They
or
don't need visas.
yes, that, and also they just have more countries open to them in general. So generally in developing countries, their passports are a lot weaker, not only for how long they can stay, but also where they're allowed into. So having when you have those restrictions on your passport like that, it makes living this lifestyle just so much more challenging. So there's a lot of privilege in being able to live this lifestyle. There really is. And one of the things I talk about in my podcast is the privilege of a one-way flight. I mean, it's amazing that we can do a one-way flight. And now that's not possible everywhere. I mean, there are countries that will require that you show proof of return or proof of exit at the very least. But, there are a lot of places that just, yeah, come on in. Your passport looks good to us, there. So, yeah, so there's a lot of privilege with that. And there's a lot of entitlement too in the digital nomad community. There's a lot of belief that, well, I can travel the world, therefore I am entitled to be wherever I want to be. And that does not sit well with me. I don't like that at all because I feel it's very disrespectful to the people that, are native to these places. I mean, if everybody had that same access to travel and could go, wherever they want, whenever they want, yeah, sure, whatever, go for it. But that's just not the case. I mean, a lot of these people in these communities, especially to these countries where nomads brag about living like kings or queens, these locals are so poor that there's no chance of them being able to live a life like that. That's not a possibility for them. So, there's this very stark contrast, and it goes unrecognized in that community to a degree that I'm not really it's hard for me to sit around a group of nomads and be like, yeah, I'm a part of this, because it's like, oh my god, there's a lot of unrecognized privilege and a lot
Yeah,
to unpack here.
but
Yeah.
how do you what do you do sort of practically? I guess it's like, the first step is saying, yeah, I realize I'm privileged being Western and white. But then like what do you do like practically to kind of overcome that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a good question. It's a hard question too, because there really, when you think about it, there's nothing that you or I or we could do to undo, the injustices or the inequality. There's nothing we can do single handedly. It's just not possible. But this awareness, the baseline awareness and acceptance of that, and frankly, just sitting in the cognitive dissonance of, yes, I'm privileged, and I'm using that privilege to go to another country and experience a thing that not everybody has access to, and being able to sit in that and allow that discomfort is really big. It's a huge thing, and I think a lot of people don't even make it to that because it's really uncomfortable. I mean, when I was walking around in Colombia and seeing people living, literally in cardboard boxes. I mean, it's very hard to reconcile, like, that I was just about to go up to the top floor of this incredible building where, there had a sick apartment with a sick view. It's really hard to reconcile that. But I think it's really important because if we just push it out of our minds altogether and we disregard it, then, we're turning a blind eye, and that doesn't do anyone any good. So I think the I guess the long answer to that is that, it requires this ongoing commitment to really examining these things that are uncomfortable, and exploring different ways to offset that or to at least understand. One thing that I found is that locals that I connect with tend to be more favorable of my values as a US citizen than they are of most other US citizens, because after talking to me they say, "Oh, okay, you're not like other Americans. You have really nuanced opinions and insights into things that they don't usually have. So just being able to speak to those things and send that signal that, like, hey, like I listen and I know that I come from a place of privilege, and being able to put it out there like that really inspires a lot of, I guess, comfort in people that are, in positions of less privilege, because they feel more seen and heard, because you're not just ignoring this very obvious power imbalance. You're addressing it. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it is frankly just listening and then making it known that you listened.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's like the same, well, it's just the same dilemma we face. I mean, even in my own city here in Canada, like, there's many homeless people and things like this. And it is the sort of thing, like, how do you, you kind of live an ethical life as you see all this sort of injustice or poverty or whatever around you? Like, what, yeah, I mean, I guess, like, there's sort of like structural systemic issues, and how do you, yeah, I mean, it's,
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's a structural issue. It's systemic, and we as individuals have very little power to change that. But if we are talking about it more, there's a way better chance that that we could change those things, and that we could create this critical mass that's educated on these issues that could make a change. So I feel strongly about bringing this up, especially as a privileged traveler. I have access to these experiences that a lot of other people don't have, and educating people that hold similar levels of privilege to me, I think is a good step in the right direction of trying to mitigate the lack of understanding that surrounds that.
I mean, are the living standards that different between locals and digital nomads? I mean, are the accommodations completely different? Are they shopping in different places?
Well, so it
Is
really
there like almost like a
depends.
separate economy?
Yes, absolutely, especially in the, nations that have been pillaged by, richer nations. There is a huge difference. The tourism experience. I mean, just the Airbnbs that they rent out to tourists look different than stuff that locals generally rent out. So and part of that is there a currency thing. So in Guatemala, things are pretty cheap for us coming from the U.S. And in Colombia, even more so. I mean, that's one of the 10 worst currency values in the world. So going there is like, wow, I can really,
Everything's
Yeah,
get
on
a lot of
sale.
exactly.
value. Right,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
right.
So, and that's
Yeah.
another part of it too, is really being cognizant of that, and not trying to, and that's another thing too, is that I didn't want to brag about how
Right.
cheap I got my medical care for,
Yes.
because it's not a good look,
Well,
right? It's like, hey, by the way, medical
yeah.
tourism, and
Yeah.
like I took advantage of a system where people struggle, so it's not a great look, but it's worth mentioning in the context of healthcare. Like, wow, look, my experience was easier than if I were to do it in the States. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and Anya, one of the crazy things about that is, and it's such a bad reflection on the U.S. because it's not just there. There are places all over the world where there's like a pipeline of medical treatment,
Mm-hmm.
of like
Yeah.
going to Vietnam to get dentistry work done, really weird stuff like that. And that's, I mean, for the U.S., which boasts about being the richest and having the best healthcare system, to have people have to go to lesser developed countries. I mean, that tells you what the state of the U.S. system really is for a lot of
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
which is
I
right.
was just talking to my partner right before this about how I had read a headline about how Tijuana is seeing this huge influx of women from the US seeking out abortions, because there's apparently this clinic, or maybe multiple clinics in Tijuana, that are willing to do it, and it's affordable. And now it's like 25% of the people that they're seeing in Tijuana are from the US. And that's a huge portion Yeah, it's sad. It really is.
And it speaks to another thing about local sort of varieties of religion. And I'm curious as if you have any insight on this. One of the things we've learned doing the podcast is that North American atheists typically, and in general and very broadly, when we talk about what's wrong with religion, we're talking about the local varieties of Christianity, basically what we were raised with, which I'm
Right.
guessing is a little different for you. You've always had this sort of outsider. Have you always had an outsider perspective on religion?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, my parents were both atheists. They didn't really see a need to educate us on religion until I was about 5, and then they found out that I didn't know what the cross was, and they were like, "All right, it's probably
Yeah,
time.
we
It
have
doesn't
to.
need to be,
Yeah,
yeah, it
we're
doesn't
trying
need to
to
be an
avoid it, but we can't.
indoctrination."
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's when they found the Ethical Society. It's because they offered Sunday programming for kids, and a lot of it was around ethics and morality and learning about different religions, but not indoctrinating with them. So that was a huge part of my upbringing. Was I got a pretty nice comprehensive view into religion, one that most U.S. kids don't have. So I had this view but again, I grew up in St. Louis, which is a real kind of like a tiny blue dot in a sea of red. So it's liberal-ish, and the rest of the state is super conservative and super Catholic. So um, so I've always been surrounded by Christianity and really mostly Catholicism, and I still have Catholics in parts of my family. So yeah, so like other North Americans, I totally fall into that camp of when I criticize religion, it's typically Christianity. I mean, that's the one that I feel has been the most egregious in my life. So yeah, that's the one that I criticize the most.
Right. But now when you're in
But
Guatemala, and I mean, and we can expand this to any place you've been, but like in Guatemala and seeing the rise of evangelicals there, does that same critique hold, or are you developing new critiques? Are you looking at other religions differently, religions that you knew maybe from a textbook, but now seeing, oh, this is how it actually works? Has it changed your perspective on religions at all?
I wouldn't say it's changed. It's just kind of validated what I already suspected, which is that
Uh-huh.
they're a bunch of scamming missionary motherfuckers, and they take advantage of these people who are not that as educated, really living in poverty, really trying to provide better for their families and live better lives. And the church comes in with opulence, and how can you say no to that? I mean, it's the Mormon church here that really drives me crazy, because they have this, the giant spire with, I mean, it's like any Mormon church anywhere. They're very uniform, the Mormons. And someone told me last weekend, actually, that if you go to any tiny little village in Guatemala, there will always be a Mormon church there. Yeah, so the Mormons have really gotten a foothold here as well, and I remember having an interaction actually in Porto, Portugal, with some. I think it was Mormons. Yes, it was Mormons. Um,
Mormons in Porto, the city founded
yeah,
on wine. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it was really funny too, because we had just arrived. We were like flying onto this train to catch it right after landing at the airport, and we got on this train and just happened to get on the same car with these Mormons. And then they were trying to be really nice, right? They were like, "Oh yeah, we've been here. We know the town like in the back of our hand. Can we help you get anywhere?" And I had a travel day. I was tired, and I don't really like Mormons that much, so I was like, like, kindly get out of my face. Like, I just not right now, sir. And then I watched them kind of like corner this poor Italian girl, and she was trying to be nice, and they eventually got into, oh yeah, we're here for the missionary work, and
See,
what I've heard
this
is that
is
if you get sent to Europe on a missionary trip, it's basically like a vacation. It's cushy because they all know
It's a
that
reward.
you're not winning over any Europeans. Hell
Yeah.
no. Like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, Mitt
They
Romney
aren't
went
going
to
to.
Paris, and you
Yeah.
think that's coincidence, just
Right.
luck of the draw?
Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. You think he got Paris because they picked it out of a hat? Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things with that, a bit of an aside is that for everybody listening, one of the reasons that's done, they don't actually grow the Mormon church through missions. Most of what it teaches them is that everybody hates you, and you're only ever going to be accepted by other Mormons. So it's just go have doors slammed in your face for 6 months to a year. And then when you come back, you're going to realize that we're the only people who are ever going to take you seriously.
Interesting.
So
Yeah,
I always go out of my way to be
Ah.
incredibly nice to them, as nice as I can be, because that's a terrible, terrible system of training people to isolate themselves.
that's a good reason to be nice to them. I hadn't thought about it that way before. But
Yeah.
I mean, it would be essentially reinforcing the Mormon belief, right? To be mean to them.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah,
makes a
you're
lot of
never going to
sense.
reach these people. They're never going to hear it. They don't even want to listen to you. Yeah, it's a great way to build an in-group, out-group dynamic. But it's also, Anya, what I like about this is you've broadened your horizons and you've learned how terrible other religions can be.
Yes.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and having worked with Humanists International, my exposure to understanding the impacts of Islam, I mean, that is a whole other thing. And I think there's often this Western, secular, I guess, trepidation to criticize Islam because they don't want to get into, offending culture or anything like that. But frankly, like, Islam is incredibly oppressive, and the most casework for Humanists International comes out of the Middle East and North Africa. They are under threat of death a lot of the time. It is just genuinely not safe to be a non-believer in that part of the world. And I think there's just a lot of Western secular people are afraid to kind of touch on that a lot of the time. And then some people, like, don't have any fear at all doing that, and will write a book about how how messed up the religion is, and then upset people. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing, and I think there's a lot to compare between Islam and Christianity. But when you get down to it, I mean, they're doing the same thing, right? One might be more terrifyingly oppressive than the other, and more intertwined and in bed with the state. But they're doing the same thing. So yeah, I think they deserve their share of criticism as well, for sure.
Absolutely. Well then, should we move on to can a true nomadic humanist?
Ooh, yeah, I like
Yeah,
it.
this is the lightning round, Anya.
Okay.
All right, Nathan, I can't explain these rules. I've tried every week.
Yeah,
I lose it.
usually we ask, can a true atheist do such and such? Can a true atheist say, "Oh my God," for example? For you, Anya, we're gonna change it to, can a true nomadic humanist? So we have some questions for you on that subject. Just a short answer, yes or no, and then you can give a little brief explanation. So, can a true nomadic humanist travel by plane?
Ooh. Oh, that one's so hard.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with yes, and the reason why is because if you're conscious of carbon emissions from airplanes and you are doing something to offset those emissions, that is better than nothing, and your travel will never compare to Taylor Swift's jet fuel consumption.
Yeah.
So
Good point.
got to keep it in perspective.
Okay, so maybe not travel by private jet.
Yeah, no, I would advise against that.
Okay. All right, how about this? Can a true nomadic humanist refuse to use a squat toilet?
I mean, yeah, I would say so. I'd say, I'd push back on it. I'd push back on why a true nomadic humanist would decide to not use a squat toilet. But, if there's some sort of health concern, then I would yield to that.
Have you been in that predicament? Have you ever faced that?
I
Squat
have.
toilets, for listening, they're usually, it's almost like a
Right.
urinal that's built into the floor, facing up. It's just a hole in the floor. You put your feet on the side, and you don't sit.
Yeah, and I've
And it's
been
been okay?
camping, so yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's whatever. If you're cool with pooping in the
Right.
woods, I
Yes.
mean, a squat toilet's gonna be
Yes.
fine.
Right. Okay. Can a true nomadic humanist visit churches, temples, or other holy sites in their travels?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I would recommend it. I mean, having those experiences helps build your knowledge of religion, and really helps build a context and a base of understanding. Wow,
Right.
these people have a
Yes.
lot of money and
Yeah.
a lot of history. So I think that's really important to kind of to stand in a church and absorb that fact. Is when you're looking up at an enormous steeple with beautiful stained glass windows. I mean, what can you say but
Yeah.
holy
Yeah.
shit, they've got money.
Yeah. Now, are you okay following the rules there and being quiet and respectful? Do you?
Yeah, I figure, if I go into their space, that's on me. I can keep my mouth shut for the amount of time that I'm in there. Although there was one time that I went and visited the Vatican, and they have a pretty strict rule about not being able to go in there without sleeves on. And
Mm.
I was there in like
Yeah.
August or
Yeah.
July, and it was really hot. So I was like, oh, come on, like I don't have sleeves. Give me a break. So my boyfriend at the time, just this was really silly, but he put his hands on top of my shoulders as like makeshift sleeves. And for
Uh-huh.
some reason, we
Right.
got away with that.
Wow.
Right.
The
Yeah.
Vatican of all
Yeah.
places.
Yeah,
Oh my
I
goodness.
know.
Okay, next one. Can a true nomadic humanist live in a country where you don't speak the language?
Yes.
How does that
And
work out?
well, a lot of just trying every day. I mean, it's hard. It's hard being in a place where you don't speak the dominant native language. Um, you know, there's actually not this season, but the next season of the Nomadic Humanist. There's going to be a whole episode on language. And the dominance of English and what that means as a native English speaker going somewhere else where English isn't dominant, and that there's often an expectation, especially of North Americans going to Mexico, that they're going to speak English to you because, well, I'm a gringo tourist, and by God, speak English to me. So I go into that. And actually, I wrote a blog piece about that not too long ago, and it's basically tips for learning language abroad. And it takes into account that imbalance of English being this really dominant language. So one of the things that I recommend in that blog is, out of respect, it's a good idea to learn like 3 words to help you communicate, cordial, pleasantness. So generally, like the local greeting, please and thank you. If that's all you get, that's something, and you can communicate that to a person,
Mm-hmm.
and they can see that
Mm-hmm.
you're
Yeah.
trying, and that's something. So yeah, I would say, and you have to learn somehow. So if you're going to learn a language, immersion is a great way to do it.
Yeah. No, definitely. Can a true nomadic humanist think local food is gross? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Um, uh,
Oh, okay.
I'm a
Oh no, what happened?
vegetarian. I'm a
Ooh.
vegetarian, but I've strayed kind of away from that the past 2 years because, well, first of all, I've been a
Mm.
vegetarian for half my
Yeah.
life now, so I
Yes.
feel pretty good about the time
Yeah.
I've put in.
You can
Um,
afford to cheat now and then, I
and
guess.
Yeah.
I feel okay with going with a more of a reducitarian diet. I feel like ethically that's okay with me. Especially because I encourage other people to go reducitarian over vegetarian because, a lot of us reducing meat intake is better than just me not eating meat ever. So, and the other reason for me cutting back on pure vegetarianism is because my partner and I are hoping to eventually move aboard a sailboat and travel that way as digital nomads instead of using airplanes as much. And it's kind of hard to be a vegetarian in the ocean. So I'm trying to get more into fish. But to answer your question, yes, no,
Okay.
there is
Yes.
absolutely gross local food. Like there is gross local food
Hmm.
in the United States and in
Yeah.
Canada. Like,
Yes. Yes.
there's icky stuff everywhere.
What was something that really put you off? Was there one particular dish?
So the fermented canned fish in Iceland.
Oh, oh
I
yeah,
didn't try it
the shark stuff.
because, yeah, the really stinky stuff, like the stuff
Mm,
that there's like a ton of videos on YouTube of
mm,
foreigners trying this stuff, and like
mm.
as soon as they open the can, like you can almost see the stench hit them in the face. It's such a visceral reaction to the smell that you
Mm.
just know that that's gotta taste like shit. So I was like, there's just no way there's no way I'm gonna try that. I have a
Mm,
sensitive stomach and I don't think it's gonna make it through that. So that was one
mm.
of the things where I was like, nope, I can't do it.
Makes total sense. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Oh, can a true nomadic humanist insist on doing things your way, the way you do them at home, all the time, what you're used to?
I'm going to go with no. You really need to be able to adapt. And if you do insist stubbornly to do things your way, the way you always do them at home, you're going to run into some problems. It's going to make you unhappy. Your expectations are going to be shattered. It doesn't work. So, one of the skills that I've really gained through this experience is being able to adapt. I mean, it's a really valuable skill. And, what serves me here in Guatemala, it might not serve me in where I go next. And I don't know where I'm going next. So I can't tell you what will serve me there.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Yeah. Can a true nomadic humanist gentrify a neighborhood? Hmm.
Ooh, this one's really, really, really hard. Um, I'm gonna say, yeah, they can gentrify a neighborhood. It's really hard to not, especially when we're just coming in at a different wealth bracket than, it's really hard to not gentrify because, you're essentially coming in, you're driving up prices. And that's something that I'm still struggling with and trying to work out. I don't have a good answer to that, but yes, no, nomadic humanists can gentrify. That does happen.
Mm. Can a true nomadic humanist hang out with mostly other expats?
Yeah. Yes. I think that's okay. Although I do question that when I see, well, particularly, and this is very particular of the nomad community, is that they tend to kind of glom together, because it's this is a weird lifestyle. It's very unique, and there's not a ton of other people that can share in it. And having people that kind of get it, it's nice. But when it's just those people and they don't socialize with locals, I start to wonder
Hmm.
why that
Hmm.
is and
Yeah.
what's behind that. Yeah.
And can a true nomadic humanist essentialize foreign people?
Essentialize?
Yeah. So the idea being that they are like, so Guatemalans are a certain way because they're Guatemalans and they're all like that.
Oh.
I guess you don't do much essentializing.
Hmm. I don't. I am very cautious to not do that. I think there's always a shred of truth in every stereotype, but it's just never universal. It never is. And the more I travel, the more I learn, someone in the city in Guatemala, for example, completely different than someone, in a village. There's not you can't generalize in that way. There's no, yeah, it's really hard to do that. And I shy away from doing it because there's just such a broad variety of people out there.
Mm. Now, how much of this was learned on the road, and how much of it did you bring with you before you left, or when you left, I suppose?
I think, I learned quite a bit of it before I started really getting into traveling, because I was really into just global life and culture before that. And because of that, in high school and in college or university, I would often befriend the international students and hang around them all the time. Like, all right, you got to tell me everything. Like, we got to be buds. And so I just hung out with them all the time, and realized, like, you cannot generalize people from a place. It just doesn't work that way. And yeah, so, and the fear in doing that is, if you meet one person from a place where you've never met anyone else from that place before, and you have a very bad experience with that person, then that place then saddles the reputation of that one person, and that's not fair. So, and I've done that before. That has happened in my mind before, where I'm like, that person, I really don't like them. So I don't know if I want to visit that place. I'm like, wait, I can't do that. That's not fair to people in that place. Like, this is one person, So it's important to meet lots of people and kind of cast that out.
That's good to know. That's a good way to think about it. So, Anya, your podcast is coming out soon,
Mm-hmm.
on the AU network. What do you want
Yes.
people to find in it? What do you want them to take away from listening? This is the wrap up. What's the big takeaway?
Yeah, so it's coming out September 14th. That is 2 Wednesdays, or I guess you're going to record, or I don't know when you're dropping this, but September 14th is a Wednesday. The things that I want people to take away from this is that the travel lifestyle is very different, and interacting with people in this lifestyle requires a lot more intentionality. Because if you're coming at it with all of your your biases and everything that you've learned from where you grew up, then you're going to have a really really hard time appreciating differences and being able to learn how to adapt, frankly. So that and really embracing the fact that we do have inequality, and not shying away from those conversations, because the more that we talk about it, the easier it's going to get. I mean, if we shun this topic of conversation, it's not going to get easier. So I really want to bring those conversations front and center, so that all of us can be more ethical travelers.
Yeah.
Excellent. I hope people take it to heart.
Me too.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much, Anya. It was really, really great talking with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
likewise. Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, that was Anya Overmann of the Nomadic Humanist podcast. Todd, what were some of your reflections from that conversation?
One thing is she seems to know what she's talking about. She's learned this through doing it, right? She's fortunate in some sense because she's raised with this humanist perspective. She becomes a world traveler. Humanism informs her travels and how she views the world. That's pretty great. And now she's turning into the podcast, which you can check out if you have questions about what it means to travel ethically, what it means to travel as a humanist. She's there to talk about it, and that's what the podcast is for, and that's friggin' great. That's fantastic. Thing is like she's also right when she says like it's tremendous privilege, right? Like to be able to do something like that. We also forget that some people who do that, it is not a tremendous privilege, right? Like lots of people have to go to other countries to get work that pays enough money to support their family in their home country. So people are doing this for all sorts of reasons. It's not just for people going that way. What does it mean if you have to go to a different country for work? What is it? How should you treat people? How should you interact with people who come to a country out of economic necessity? So that matters. And if you like, If you don't interact like that, maybe you do, maybe you don't. And if you're not planning to travel abroad, you probably live somewhere you didn't grow up. You've probably changed a community, right? Like most, I think it used to be everybody dies 25 miles from where they're born. Now that's not the case. Late stage capitalism has uprooted us, totally transplanted us to everywhere. We've got to move around. You got to chase those dollars, right? And this, I didn't know how common this is in the US. Only about a third of Florida's residents were born in Florida.
Ah, right.
So,
Interesting.
like 2/3 of the people in Florida are not Floridians. They're not born and bred. They're not raised as Floridians. They're from somewhere else. Everyone's a transplant. Everyone's in an alien culture. How do we interact? How how does a humanist background, a humanist worldview inform how we ought to interact with one another? I don't have the answers for this, but Anya's podcast on the AU Studios Network can start providing those answers. What about you, Nathan? Anything you took away from it?
Yeah, I think the difficult thing is like any kind of discussion about privilege, it's hard to move from like recognizing the privilege to acting upon it because the privilege itself is kind of created by forces larger than yourself that any kind of personal decisions can necessarily impact. But I think it's like going through with a recognition of that privilege will hopefully change how you interact. I mean, like, obviously being a real like rude traveler or something, like rude to people who if they've got a just different customs than you or something like that, and obviously that's definitely the wrong way to act. I guess the thing is like how to live ethically in general in the world is a question that is sort of a constant process of figuring out, and the same with the more specific case of traveling.
Yeah, yeah, that's tough because it's. I mean, one of the points of privilege, one of the things that makes it privilege is that it's invisible to you. You aren't
Yes,
aware of it.
that's the thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Typically, it becomes more noticeable when you come back. You kind of realize, especially after
yeah,
seeing other ways that the world is organized and how people interact. Customs of
yes,
and norms of behavior that show how what the hierarchy is and how you're stratified. We
yeah.
definitely see that. How we
I
build
feel
more.
like, yeah, traveling in general has such a benefit. I mean, for forming one's own worldview and so on. I mean, like you learn a ton about yourself and about the world by traveling. But then like there's this ethical issue of like, you know, does like tourism in particular places where it's not clear whether the tourism is doing more harm than good or whatever. It's hard to kind of like balance out like what is the more sort of like the personal benefit you might gain, but is it doing harm at the same time? I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, it's yeah, really hard to know in some cases. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and in a lot of cases, like if you're traveling for pleasure, if you're just like, oh man, winter's been so tough, work is such a drag, everything's killing me. I just need 4 or 5 days where I can sleep and eat and just be warm. It's tough to do that and not sort of behave like an imperialist, right? Like
Yes.
the
Right.
way
Exactly.
international
Yeah.
travel is set up, like if you're gonna get into this package, that's the way it's set up. You don't that structure, you don't get to decide how it's going to be. It's just the easiest. Yep. Or you don't even see it. One of the old jokes about developing countries was that they only had a few new things. They always had a great airport, brand new highways, beautiful palace, and a fantastic brewery. And the reason was that every time a diplomat or someone from the IMF or WTO came, they would fly into this beautiful airport and then take a limo down this beautiful highway and arrive at this beautiful government palace and then be served a fresh cold beer, and they would think like, wow, this country's really got it together. And that's how most international travel is set up, where like you arrive and you're shuttled and that's where you go. So learning to get off and learning to travel ethically is it's difficult.
Yeah, and I think like I mean, there's so much to talk about. Like, even sort of things that kind of pretend to give you a more authentic experience are really themselves like just as much staged sort of thing. I mean, I'm thinking about, like, for example, like the sort of like voluntourism thing where it's like you pay whatever amount to like work at an orphanage or something, but everything is sort of, I
Yeah,
imagine, like carefully
yeah,
choreographed for you to like,
right.
have this fulfilling experience or something. But it's again like a commodity or whatever. So yeah, I mean,
Right.
it's just a
Yeah.
really complicated issue. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah, it's
I'm
tough to navigate.
interested to see or to listen to what she talks about on her podcast and how she kind of makes
Absolutely.
sense of
And I
these
mean,
issues.
because
Yeah.
yeah. And she's hinted at season 2, so we'll have
Hmm.
to I have to have her back because we can talk more about that. And another thing I don't think we talked much about was like how like actually getting to see other religions in action. I don't know if you've been to countries where they're dominated by a different religion, and if you've seen that, um, the privilege or like the just how you know we think in terms of like right now Christian nationalists take up so much oxygen, but like being in other countries where with a different religion you see different things. One I'm thinking of that's just stuck in my head is how if you're in a subway here in North America or you know most places, there are those seats reserved for pregnant women, people who are injured, handicapped, whatever it is, people who are sick, people who need it, right? There's seats reserved for that, and that's who you ought to give a seat to. In places like in Thailand, those seats are reserved for monks. It's like, what do you do? Why do you need a seat? Is your feet tired because you've been working so hard?
Yeah. Right.
You're worn down from the your orange robes. Is that what's doing this? That's why you need a seat on the subway. So like it's just it's one of those things that it's not just that it scratches the surface. It gives you an insight into how other countries operate and what their priorities are and why some people in other countries are privileged and what that looks like, what religious domination in other contexts looks like. So in that sense, in that atheist sense, I find that really 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 rewarding in traveling, and also it angers up the blood in a
Right.
different way, which is
Yes.
what travel's about, isn't it? Getting angry for different
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I was traveling in Ghana in West Africa many like over 10 years ago. I wasn't an atheist at this time, but anyway, I did remember that, obviously it's a developing country and there's a lot of poverty. And then like you would drive past some of these churches and they would be like just like magnificent. And I mean, you can see like all the money is going there, or I mean, not all the money, but like a lot of money is going to making these like the most beautiful buildings, like by far, really, like anywhere around. I mean, yeah. So it was yeah, quite stark to notice that. Yeah.
Right, and it makes sense, and it's not, and it's probably something that you would be able to see in the American Bible Belt
Yeah, that's
too,
true. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's crazy. I had a similar experience in Southeast Asia where they were like staying in this village where there's a lot of dirt. I think all the houses had like dirt floors. Really, really, really small. Chickens running around. Yeah, it's just a poor, self-sufficient little village. And then one morning, they all left out buckets of rice and food and money and
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
stuff. And the like junior monks would come by and collect all of it and bring it down to the temple where they
Right.
just sat around and smoked all day. It's like, I mean, temple's gorgeous,
Yeah.
but it's like this is like why like
Yeah. That's a very
it's
weird
extractive
system. Yeah.
for what reason? Yeah, for what
Yeah.
purpose?
I mean, it sounds like a pretty good gig to be a monk, but
I mean, that was yes, yeah, and I think that's how they get you. It's like, yeah, I can just be a monk,
yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, you don't get the complete story, you don't understand
Yeah.
everything, but you get a real sense of how that our analysis of religion is correct, right? And it's not as atheists, we have a general position, and our general position is that religion is bad, and that's generally true, and it's great to see it in action. I feel like everything we've been discussing is an aside,
Yeah,
Nathan.
that's okay
What's
though.
something? Is there anything else we need to talk about?
Just to make sure to check out Anya's show. Yeah, for more. Yep,
Yeah,
it's
fantastic, of course.
yeah,
Nomadic Humanists.
yep.
Yeah, should be live now. So check that out. That's over on atheistunited.org/podcast. Link is down below. In fact, you may have found us there
Yeah,
as well. So
yeah.
yeah,
So yeah,
so it's not going to be hard to search.
yeah,
Yeah, big thanks to everybody for listening. Thank you to the audience,
yeah.
especially big ups to our
Our
patrons, our
patrons. Yeah,
Patreons,
yeah.
patrons. I don't even know how to
I
say
think
it,
that's just
Nathan.
patrons. Yeah. Lars, Debbie, and the AHS Plus blog. Yeah, thank you guys so much for your support. And
Thank you very, very much.
yeah,
And yeah, we'd love it if everybody could become one. We understand the limits to giving, and things are tough all over. If you can't give any money, be sure to subscribe, come back again. We'll see you in about 2 weeks, right here on. At, I guess we're part of AU Studios now, Nathan. Is that a
I think
fact?
it's a fact. Yes.
It's I don't feel any
Yeah,
different. The room doesn't look any different.
not yet.
So big thanks to Atheist United as well. Let's see. Big thanks, Red Japan, killed it again. And thank everybody for listening. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.